Discover the incredible secrets to becoming that inspiring guy. Transform your life in 30 days. Every morning in Maplewood, as the first light creeps over the factory roofs, Jake bursts through the gates of the local manufacturing plant. His hands are calloused, and he feels the weight of the world within them. They've cranked gears, tightened bolts, and felt the pulse of machines, yet today feels heavier than most. With each pull of the lever, he wonders if his relentless labor is enough to keep his family afloat amidst rising bills to give his wife Sarah, and their 2 little ones, what they deserve. That glimmering hope for something greater sits in the back of his mind, teasing him but frequently smothered by the whispers of others, the nagging voice that says, "Here's the man who just can't catch a break." At weekend barbecues, he chuckles awkwardly. Other fathers swap stories of promotions, new jobs, and fresh cars, while Jake nods, shame twisting in his gut. He can't help but feel like he's floundering while they soar. The hours spent laboring leave him tired, not just of the work, but of the sense of inadequacy that comes with every fleeting smile and hollow cheers for his great job. He wonders if he is forever locked into this hardscrabble existence. Then, one fateful night, everything shifts. The diner is bustling, the aroma of fried potatoes thick in the air, when a gravelly voice beckons him from across a greasy table. The silver-haired veteran tells tales not just of battlefield valor, but of resilience. Every setback, he says, is a setup for a comeback. Those words strike at Jake's heart, igniting a flicker of determination. Over the next 30 days, he commits to improving himself. Each morning, he wakes with renewed purpose, setting small, obtainable goals to not only reshape his future but also set a solid example for his children. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tension grows at home, though. Sarah, awash in her own solitude, feels pushed aside as Jake pours into community service, aiming to uplift local youth alongside his personal journey. The love that once felt like an unbreakable foundation between them starts to fray. Her laughter fades, replaced with a subtle but palpable frustration as days turn into weeks. Just as Jake begins to plant his feet on the ground, the town faces a crisis. A major employer announces layoffs, and the ripple effect shatters the dreams of families around him. Friends become anxious, neighbors' faces are filled with worry. Jake finds himself grappling with the reality that maybe his striving for more during their time of need makes him less a hero and more a coward. Amidst the chaos, emotions spiral, culminating in a clash of fists and hurtful words. Jake realizes he isn't just battling his inner demons, he is confronting the prejudices that bind his community. Standing at a crossroads, he is torn between selfish aspirations and the cry of collective pain. Just then, Sarah steps forward, tears shimmering like dew in the early morning light. Suddenly, everything he thought he knew about strength, sacrifice, and success hangs in the balance. Will Jake find a way to weave together his dreams with the love he holds closest, or will he risk losing it all chasing an elusive mirage? Jake sat on the edge of their unmade bed, his heart heavy in his chest. The sun peeked through the curtains, casting soft light across the room, but it did little to chase away the shadows settling in his mind. The arguments from the day before echoed in his ears, Sarah's voice a haunting reminder of how far apart they had drifted. He rubbed his temples, searching for clarity between the tightening of his palms and the weight of the tears he had seen streak down her cheeks. Realizing he needed to make a change, he stood up and carefully opened the bedroom door, letting the muted sounds of their children filtering through the house pull him into action. He walked toward their room, where the familiar chaos of toys scattered on the floor felt like a slice of normalcy in an increasingly complicated world. Their 2 little ones, Ella and Max, were busy building a fort. They looked up, eyes bursting with brightness as Jake shouted, "Hey, who's ready for an adventure? Max jumped up, his excitement contagious. Me. Can we go outside, Dad? As they poured out into the small yard, fresh air filled Jake's lungs, sparking something akin to hope. He remembered the promise he had made to himself on that fateful night at the diner, the determination to inspire not just himself, but his family. He picked up a soccer ball, joining the kids in a game of make-believe champions, their laughter ringing out in the quiet neighborhood. But even as he played, the thoughts of Sarah lingered in the background. Could he still be the husband she needed while chasing his dreams? Each playful kick of the ball felt like a step toward bridging the gap formed by misunderstanding and resentment. That evening, while the children tumbled into bed with sleepy smiles, Jake approached Sarah. She was seated in the dim light of the living room, absorbed in her phone but not really seeing it. The distance between them felt vast, like a chasm that had opened after years of deliberate neglect toward their relationship. He took a deep breath, summoned every ounce of vulnerability, and softly said, "Can we talk?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, a mix of anticipation and apprehension. "About what?" "I want to fix this us. I want to show you that I can be better, for me and for our family." He stepped closer, desperate for her to sense the sincerity in his words. "I've been out there trying to help others, but I realize I've been neglecting you. I've seen our marriage going south, and I want to turn it around before it goes too far." Sarah looked up, her defenses slowly crumbling as she searched his face. "Jake, it's not just about what you're doing outside. It's about being here at home too. I need you. I need to know I still matter." The raw emotion in her voice made his heart ache. Taking a seat beside her, he grabbed her hand, feeling the warmth pulsing through their touch. "You are my everything. I need to step up as your partner. Let us work together, lean on each other. We can face this storm as a team." For the first time in weeks, Sarah's lips curled into a faint smile. "Do you really mean that? Can we find our way back, Jake?" Before he could respond, the ground under them shifted again. A loud knock interrupted the moment, urgent and insistent. It was Rick, their neighbor, a frantic look plastered on his face. "You've got to see this. They're organizing an emergency community meeting. We can't just sit back while our friends lose their jobs." Jake glanced at Sarah, and for a brief moment, their earlier conversation seemed swallowed by the new crisis unfolding. Would he step up not only for her but also for those around him? He nodded to Rick, ready to embrace the call to action, but deep inside, he knew that the path to rebuilding his life would be anything but straight. Would he find a way to balance his ambitions with the love he yearned to nourish? As the trio hurried out the door, Jake's heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead. Would he rise above the turmoil or become lost in it? The answer felt closer than before, yet still far away. Jake stepped into the cool night air, the weight of Sarah's gaze lingering as they followed Rick toward the community center. The streetlights flickered above, providing a meager glow that couldn't quite push back the darkness that spread like ink on the sidewalk. He felt the urgency radiating from Rick, who was already explaining the situation as they moved. "It's getting serious," Rick said, his voice tinged with panic. "Store closures, layoffs. If we don't band together, we're going to lose a lot more than jobs." Jake nodded, feeling a swell of determination. This wasn't just about their neighbors, it was about revitalizing his own sense of purpose. The world might be tilting on its axis, but he could still find his footing. He glanced back at Sarah, who walked close behind. Her expression was a mix of worry and gratitude. She was still with him. Perhaps this was a chance to prove himself, not just as a husband, but as a pillar of their community. Once inside the community center, Jake was struck by the crowd. Friends and neighbors filled the chairs, their murmurs swirling like wind before a storm. He spotted familiar faces: Mr. Thompson from down the block, who always waved at the kids, Mrs. Garcia, who baked too many cookies but never seemed to mind, and a few couples from their book club. The visible tension mirrored his own internal chaos. As they settled into seats, Rick jumped up to address the crowd, his voice booming against the walls. We need to come together. We're facing these challenges as a community. Let us brainstorm ideas to support each other and save our homes. Applause erupted, a wave of energy flowing through the room. Jake felt a spark of hope shoot through him. Could they really do this? Could they find a way to stand strong as a united front? He nudged Sarah gently. What do you think we should do? He whispered, noticing her eyes were lit with a fire he hadn't seen in weeks. I think we need to start with a fundraiser, she replied, her voice warmer than earlier. But also workshops. Teach people new skills, maybe even focus on our kids. Jake's heart swelled. You mean like a community camp? With events for the kids? She nodded enthusiastically, and suddenly, the darkness that had clouded their communication felt lighter. Ideas were flowing, and he could see both their spirits lifting. Rick continued to guide the meeting, inputting ideas and asking for volunteers. Jake raised his hand. When Rick called on him, Jake felt all eyes on him. I think we should reach out to local businesses for sponsorships, he suggested. This could be a way to uplift everyone involved. We give them face time in exchange for support. The crowd agreed, and the buzz of excitement grew. For the first time in a while, Jake felt something within him shift. He could be a leader, a driving force not just within his home, but outside it as well. With each passing moment, the energy in the room transformed, bringing people together with shared purpose. Jake looked at Sarah, her face glowing with encouragement. After the meeting, they floated among the friends, brainstorming with others and finding common ground. With every smile exchanged and every encouraging word, Jake felt the gaping chasm between him and Sarah close a little more. But as they wrapped up for the evening, Rick intercepted them, his brow furrowed. You need to see something. There's more at stake here than we thought. The weight of those words hung in the air. Jake exchanged a concerned glance with Sarah. What could be worse than job losses? As they stepped outside, anticipation and dread curled around Jake's insides, tightening his chest. Was he ready to confront whatever came next? Would this moment finally be the turning point that truly altered his life, or was he about to tumble down another rabbit hole of uncertainty? Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach as Rick gestured for them to follow him further down the sidewalk. The night air felt heavier now. Overhead, the stars seemed muted, like a warning of the storm that was brewing on the horizon, a storm not of nature but of circumstance. He glanced at Sarah beside him, her brow was furrowed in concern, mirroring his unease. Rick led them to a side entrance of the community center, where a small group had gathered. Their voices were hushed, eyes darting around as they seemed to share something serious. Jake couldn't shake the anxiety clinging to him. What could they possibly be talking about that would warrant this secretive assembly? What is so urgent, Rick? Jake asked, his tone more demanding than he intended. Rick turned to face him, his expression taking on a grim quality. They received news from the town hall today. There's going to be a major vote next week with implications we didn't see coming. A vote? About what? Sarah stepped closer, her voice trembling slightly. A development project, Rick continued, glancing at the group before returning his gaze to Jake and Sarah. They want to convert the community center into a shopping complex. It's all hush-hush, but apparently, it's a done deal if we don't raise a significant enough opposition. If it happens, it won't just take away our meeting space, it'll tear apart everything we've built here. Jake felt the air leave his lungs. The community center wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was life, laughter, relationships. It was where Sarah and he first connected with their neighbors, where their kids played and formed bonds. But we can stop this, right? There's still time. Rick nodded, but the uncertainty in his eyes told a different story. We need to act quickly. Plan protests, rallies, raise awareness. We can't just let them bulldoze over us. In that moment, something lit up inside Jake. He thought of all the familiar faces they had seen in the meeting, all the dreams and aspirations they shared. They were resilient, and together they could fight this. "We'll rally the community," he said, determination flooding through him. "We'll organize around this." Sarah's eyes shone with that same fire he had seen earlier. "We can use the fundraiser as a platform. Let us make it clear to everyone what's at stake." Rick nodded, a sense of hope creeping back in. "Yes. We can invite the town to hear us. Inform them of what's really at risk. We need to get the message out." Deep breaths filled the chilly air as they started discussing plans. Jake felt the weight of his fears lift, replaced by a growing strength within him. They could take control of this situation, turn their collective anger into action. They would not allow their community to be swallowed whole by corporate greed. As they laid out their plans, Jake caught a glimpse of a man standing at the fringes of their gathering, his silhouette stark against the light. He didn't recognize him, but something about the man felt ominous. Before he could say anything, the stranger turned and disappeared into the night. Do you guys see that?" Jake asked, his brow knotted. "What?" Rick looked back, confusion etched on his face. "Nothing," Jake murmured, brushing it off. He couldn't afford distractions now. They had to focus on the fight ahead. But as they forged on, that feeling of unease remained a lingering shadow in his mind. What other surprises lay in wait? What did that man know? Jake felt that tension building again, as though they were on the brink of something much larger than they planned. But testing the waters ahead felt necessary. They were fighting for their lives, after all. Just as they wrapped up their initial strategy, Rick's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and suddenly went pale. "Guys, it's the town hall. They want us to come for a last-minute meeting." Jake's heart pounded. What were they stepping into? He exchanged another glance with Sarah, and the unspoken question hung heavy between them: would they walk through that door, ready to face whatever was waiting? They had no choice, after all. It was time to find out just how far they were willing to go to save their home. The town hall loomed ominously ahead. Its brick facade, once a symbol of community trust, now felt like a barrier that separated them from their hopes. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself as they approached the entrance. The flickering fluorescent lights inside cast shadows that danced across the floor, but they couldn't afford to hesitate. Sarah's hand slipped into his, a small gesture of comfort amidst the tension. "Ready?" she whispered, eyes bright with both fear and determination. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jake replied, forcing a smile. But inside, doubt gnawed at him. What if their voices weren't enough? They stepped into the bustling hall, the sound of murmurs and shuffling papers creating a chaotic symphony of nerves. Already, the room felt divided. On one side, familiar faces from their neighborhood, each one whispering anxiously to one another. On the other, a group of sharply dressed businessmen, their confident banter a stark contrast to the unease that filled the air around Jake and Sarah. Rick approached them, his expression tense. "This isn't just about the community center anymore," he said quietly, his voice barely rising above the din. "They're planning to push this project through by any means necessary." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, his heart racing. "What else is at stake?" Rick glanced around, making sure no one was listening before leaning in closer. "I overheard one of them say they have more support than we realize. Some residents have been swayed with promises of jobs or discounts at the new complex. We can't just stand by and hope they don't get the votes." Jake's chest tightened. This was more dangerous than he had imagined. He looked at Sarah, whose fierce expression now seemed tinged with fear. "Well, we have to speak up," she urged, her voice stronger now. "We need to tell them what's at risk. What this place means to us." Rick nodded, but there was a doubt that flickered in his eyes. "We can't just speak. We need to make them feel it. Make them understand that tearing this down is tearing apart our community." The chatter grew louder as a man stepped up to the podium, his confident demeanor commanding immediate attention. He introduced himself as the town's mayor, but Jake felt a surge of anger as he watched the man grin, completely unaware or perhaps unconcerned about the emotional stakes of the evening. The mayor began talking about progress and development, his words smooth and rehearsed. Jake couldn't listen anymore. He needed to act, to galvanize those around him. He glanced at Sarah and then at Rick, finding an unspoken agreement simmering in the air. They would not sit idly by. With a stealing breath, Jake raised his hand, calling for attention. The mayor paused, and the murmurs quieted down. "Excuse me," Jake said, his voice shaking slightly but filled with fire. "We're not against progress, but this isn't just a building to us. This is where our kids play, where our families connect. If this project goes through, it will disrupt everything we've built together." Some of the crowd turned to look at him, their expressions shifting from surprise to approval. He pressed on, feeling the energy building around them. "We can't let promises of jobs tear apart our community. This isn't just about saving bricks and mortar. It's about our lives." His words hung in the air, stirring something within the gathered crowd. With each passing moment, he could feel unity swelling amongst them, hearts and voices lifting. But then, he noticed that same stranger from earlier lurking at the back of the room, his presence disturbing the atmosphere once more. Jake's stomach twisted. What did he want with this crowd? Before he could voice his concerns aloud, the stranger slipped out, and an electric tension filled the room where he just stood. "Who is that guy?" Sarah whispered, casting a nervous glance at Rick. "I don't know, but I have a bad feeling," Jake admitted. As the mayor resumed his speech, Jake's thoughts raced. They were gathering support, but danger was still lurking in the shadows. Would their voices be loud enough to drown out the whispers of betrayal? And who was that man? It was becoming clear that this was just the beginning of a battle that would test their resilience, but one thing was certain: Jake was more determined than ever to fight for his home. Would it be enough to rally the community, or were they already fighting a losing battle? The night was far from over. Jake's heart raced as he stood, fighting the tide of uncertainty that threatened to crush him. He had spoken his truth aloud, and yet the shadows of doubt persisted. He glanced at Sarah, whose eyes sparkled with a mix of fear and determination. She wasn't backing down, and that gave him a boost. The murmurs in the crowd shifted to something more grounded, voices rising in agreement. Rick was nodding at Jake, an approving smile creeping across his face. A small wave of hope flickered within him. But as quickly as it came, apprehension swept back. They had stirred the pot, but what if the fire burned them instead? "Stay strong," Jake urged the momentum in the room, trying to harness the energy that buzzed like electricity. "We have to remind them that this isn't just about numbers on a piece of paper. This is our lives, our laughter, our memories." The crowd shifted again, faces brightening as others chimed in. "Yeah. This is where we remember our loved ones." One woman yelled. "We deserve better than this." Jake felt a swell of pride in knowing they were gathering their strength. But he couldn't shake the feeling that their opponents might have a trick up their sleeve. The stranger wasn't just an observer, he was there for a reason. As the mayor attempted to regain control of the meeting, a low murmur swept through. A group of locals began to stand, galvanized by Jake's words. One by one, others joined, their voices rising above the smooth cadence of the mayor's rehearsed speech. "We want the community center." A voice shouted, and a chant began to form, building in waves. "Save our center! Save our center!" The rhythm of their voices pulsed through the hall, lifting Jake's spirit. But in the periphery, the sight of that stranger creeping back into view sent a chill down his spine. The man was watching intently now, his dark eyes narrowed, analyzing the commotion with a strange intensity. "What's your plan, buddy?" Sarah muttered under her breath, catching Jake's eye. He shook his head. "No idea, but it can't be good." Families were beginning to stand together, intertwined fingers raising in solidarity, a vivid display of community power. Among them, Jake recognized the faces of children he had coached, neighbors he had shared meals with. They were all here, fighting for their place. Just as the chant grew louder and their momentum seemed unstoppable, the mayor abruptly slammed his hand on the podium. Enough. His voice echoed through the hall, cutting through the enthusiasm like a hot knife through butter. Let me remind you that this is about progress. Development is necessary for our future. That ignited boiling anger in Jake's chest. What about our future? He shouted back, stepping forward, eyes locking with the mayor with burning defiance. You think buildings and profits matter more than our lives? What happens to us if you bulldoze our home? The mayor's eyes were cold, calculating, but behind him, someone from the crowd surprisingly drew near to the front. Jake did a double take as recognition washed over him. It was an old friend from school, someone he never expected to see joining the opposition. Alan? Jake exclaimed, disbelief coloring his voice. The room fell silent, confusion painted across familiar faces as they turned to see who he was talking about. Jake, Alan responded, a nervous edge to his voice. You don't understand, but whatever he was about to say was lost in the collective gasp of the crowd. The tension crackled, electrifying the atmosphere. What could Alan possibly want with these people? Jake's mind raced. Were they really losing allies in a fight that felt ever more precarious? And as he continued to wrestle with the storm of emotions, Jake knew this battle was not just about saving a building. It was about loyalty, trust, and uncovering the truth hidden beneath the rising tide of greed. But what was the truth behind Alan's sudden presence? Why was he there, and whose side was he really on? Jake felt the stakes rising, aware that this wasn't just a community meeting anymore, it was about to become a revelation. Jake's thoughts swirled like a turbulent storm. He had expected support, encouragement, not this haunting shadow of betrayal. The way Alan stood there, fidgeting and avoiding eye contact, only intensified the anxiety that swelled in Jake's chest. It was as if the fabric of their shared history was unraveling right before him. Alan, Jake pressed, desperation lacing his voice. Are you with us or against us? The uneasy silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Jake could almost hear his heart thump in rhythm with the budding uncertainty in the room. The town he loved was being threatened, and yet here stood a familiar face, now shrouded in doubt. I just listen. Alan shouted suddenly, making the crowd flinch. You don't know everything. I have reasons for being here, reasons that might change things for all of us. What reasons? Jake shot back, frustration boiling his blood. The chant for saving the community center lingered like a beacon of hope in a stormy sea, but this unexpected twist felt like an anchor pulling him under. Alan took a deep breath, visibly steadied by the gravity of the moment. Look, I've been working with the developers. I know their plans. They're using us, Jake. They want this place for something way worse than just turning it into high-rises, he explained, his voice low but urgent. Jake felt a ripple of concern rush through the crowd, heads turning as whispers spread. What were they hearing? Could it really get worse than losing their beloved community space? As the weight of Alan's words settled, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal mingled with a strange sense of hope. If Alan was telling the truth, then perhaps there was still a fight worth having. What do you mean? What are they planning? The center is only the beginning. They want to erase our community, turn it into a commercial hub for outsiders. They need this land to build those luxury apartments. The alarm in Alan's voice resonated through the hall, a siren crying out for action. They want to push us out, face it, Jake. We no longer fit into their vision. A new chant began to take shape, but it was different from before. It was heavier, grittier, more determined. Fight for our home. Fight for our home. Echoed through the hall now, fueled by the awakening of something deeper. Jake glanced at Sarah, whose face was pivoting between anger and resolution. They had become the voice of their neighborhood, and in that singular moment Jake's fear morphed into something else. It was fierce and bright, a rage ignited not just by the loss of a building but by the encroaching threat to everything they held dear. "Then let us fight!" Jake shouted, his voice equal parts thunder and resolve. "Let us show them what this community can do when we stand together." The crowd erupted into a roaring wave, an electric pulse of unity washing over them, fierce as a wildfire. Jake felt the thrill of purpose rise in his chest. This was no longer just about saving the community center, it was about protecting their identity, their very way of life. But even with the spark of determination ignited, a growing concern gnawed at him. Was this new revelation enough to turn the tide? Would Allen's intel provide the leverage they needed against the mayor and the developers? With the flicker of hope brightening the air, a familiar face, the stranger from earlier, stepped forward again. This time, his expression was unreadable, a shadow lurking behind sharp features as if he was a piece on a chessboard waiting to make his move. "Do you really understand what you're getting into?" The stranger's voice cut through the fervor, drawing every eye to him. Jake felt the air thicken again, sharp and hot, as he prepared to face this new unknown. What would the stranger reveal? And more importantly, was Jake ready for the truth, no matter how dark it might be? "Are you willing to pay the price for what's coming?" the stranger continued, steady and low, his gaze piercing through the chaos. His presence felt heavy, like a storm cloud looming overhead. People shifted, uncertainty creeping back in, dampening the fervor that had just ignited. Jake squared his shoulders, refusing to let fear silence him. "What do you mean by that?" "We're fighting for our home. What could be worse than that?" He could feel his heart racing, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Now was not the time for doubt. The stranger's lips curved into a cynical smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes, what you believe is worth fighting for can cost you more than just money or land. It can take away trust, relationships, or even your safety. Are you prepared for that?" A chill swept through the crowd. Sarah stepped closer to Jake, her hand brushing against his arm, a reminder that they were in this together. "Jake, we need to know what we're up against. If we go into battle, we have to be ready for anything and anyone." Jake could feel the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy cloak. The stranger wasn't just presenting a warning, he was throwing down a gauntlet. It was clear that their fight was more profound than a simple community battle, it was a clash of values, of survival. "What are you getting at?" Jake challenged, his voice firm despite the quaking in his gut. "Do you know something we don't?" The stranger hesitated, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Jake sensed a moment of vulnerability, a crack in the stranger's armor. "You need to understand the developer's game. They don't just want to bulldoze the community center. They aim to dismantle your entire neighborhood's spirit. If they move in, they won't stop until your homes are replaced with glass towers. And trust me, they'll do whatever it takes to achieve that." Murmurs from the crowd passed through like a wave, a mix of anger and disbelief. People began shaking their heads. "No way. They can't take what's ours." One voice called out. "Can they?" The stranger's gaze swept over the entire assembly, his eyes cold and unyielding. "I'm not here to stop them, there's too much money on the line. I'm here because I know how to play this game. Either you let me help you, or you'll be fighting a losing battle." Jake felt the crowd's energy shift again. Hope wrestled against a wave of dread as people began to process the stranger's implications. "What do you say?" "Let us hear what he has to offer," Sarah whispered. "If he has the tactics we need, we can't afford to turn him away." Jake nodded but remained cautious. "Fine. What's your plan?" The stranger stepped forward, his demeanor shifting from chill to purpose. "I have contacts, people who can help. We can gather intelligence, sabotage their plans from within, and perhaps turn the development against them. But it won't be pretty. It won't be easy." As the stranger spoke, Jake's heart thundered in his chest. The stakes were higher than ever, and with uncertainty swirling in his mind, he knew they stood on the precipice of something monumental. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Imo, the town's activist, who had been at the forefront of every protest for years. But this time, her expression was grave. "You need to listen to me, everyone. The mayor is about to make an announcement that could change everything. If you want to fight for your home, you need to act. Right now." Jake exchanged glances with Sarah and Alan, each face reflecting a mix of resolve and fear. What was the mayor planning? Could their timing have gone from a small community rally to something larger than any of them ever anticipated? The tension electrified the space, and Jake felt the surge of urgency. His heart raced. They had to make a choice, and it had to be quick. Fight or retreat? Trust the stranger or walk away? With the weight of the moment pressing down on him, Jake took a deep breath, knowing that their next steps could alter the course of their town forever. Would they take the risk to protect their community, even if the shadows were closing in? The time for hesitance was over. Anything could happen now. Would they band together in the face of uncertainty, or would they lose everything they held dear? Jake's mind raced, the urgency of the moment sharpening his senses. He could feel the weight of all those gathered, eyes drawn to him, waiting for a decision. The stranger stood with a steady gaze, his confidence barely masking the desperation they all felt. Mo's warning hung heavy in the air like a storm cloud, electrifying their choices. "What's your plan, then?" Jake repeated, needing clarity. "If the mayor's about to announce something that could change everything, we need to know what direction we're headed." The stranger nodded slowly, assessing the gravity of Jake's question. "The mayor has ties to the developers. If he announces a partnership with them, it's only a matter of time before they start their bulldozers. But if you all move against that announcement, if you disrupt it, you'll send a clear message that you won't back down." Jake felt the tension thicken as murmurs spread through the crowd. People exchanged uncertain glances. The idea of confronting the mayor, someone they had trusted for so long, sent shivers down his spine. Could they turn on one of their own? Would they actually do it? "I know it sounds risky," the stranger continued, his voice low, "but sometimes, to protect what's yours, you have to take those risks. We can rally people, get media involved. If you expose this deal, it could derail everything they're planning." "Media?" Sarah sparked with a flicker of excitement. "If we can get people involved, really involved, we might boost our chances. The more eyes on this, the better." Jake could feel the adrenaline pulsing through him, but a thread of doubt lingered. "And if it fails? What if the media turns on us? What if the mayor retaliates? We could lose everything." "Or you could save it," the stranger interjected. "This town fought for its identity. You have the power to stand up, and together, you can move mountains. But you have to choose to fight." He could see hope flicker in the eyes of those around him, but it was a flicker drowned in fear. Everyone had something to lose, and the prospect of sacrificing it in the name of an uncertain battle was enough to paralyze anyone. Mo moved forward, her voice steady despite the haunting fear in her eyes. "The truth is, sometimes you don't get to choose your battles. They choose you. We can't turn our backs on our home, no matter what the cost. If we want to show the mayor and those developers that we're serious, we have to step into the light." Jake took a deep breath, glancing from Sarah to Alan, then back to the crowd. "We need to be loud. We need to make it clear that we won't let them push us around. Who's with us?" A murmur built into a roar. Voices rose in unison, filled with determination and defiance. It began as a whisper, but soon transformed into a steady chant of "Save our homes." That echoed through the walls. Jake felt a mix of terror and exhilaration wash over him. But just as excitement soared, a thud rang out against the door, drawing everyone's attention. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a group of suited men stepped inside, their faces lined with authority. The room fell silent, tension coiling tight as the reality of their situation came crashing in. "Now, I think," one of the men said, with a chill in his tone, "it's time to discuss your little resistance." Jake's heart raced as realization dawned. They had crossed a line, and now the world they fought to protect was colliding head-on with the power of those who wanted to take it away. This was no longer just a grassroots movement, it had escalated into a face-off against forces that would stop at nothing. Would they stand their ground when it mattered most, or was this the beginning of the end for everything they had fought for? Jake stood frozen as the suited group filled the doorway, their presence eclipsing the vibrant energy that had swept through the room just moments before. The chill in the air felt like a heavy weight pressing down on him, suffocating the hope that had ignited in their hearts. He could see Sarah's grip tightening on his arm, and the tension spread like wildfire among the crowd. The lead man, a tall figure with a slick-back hairstyle and an air of arrogance, surveyed the room with a cold smile. "You think a few passionate speeches and community meetings will stop progress? You have no idea what you're up against." "Progress?" Jake shot back, his voice rising above the murmur of fear. "This isn't progress, this is destruction. You want to tear apart our community." "We're simply providing what the people want," the man replied, dismissing Jake as if he were an irritating insect. "Luxury apartments, new shopping areas, people crave development. You're just a group of outdated ideals who don't understand the new economy." He felt the crowd inch backward, uncertainty creeping in once more, but Jake wouldn't let them retreat. "We understand just fine. You're sacrificing our homes and traditions for profit." The lead man's expression hardened, and he took a step forward. "Watch your tone. This is your only warning. We have resources, legal support, and influence. You'll find the road ahead will be impossible if you continue this fight." Jake drew in a deep breath, heart pounding with the knowledge of how right the man was. This would not be easy. But there was a spark of defiance igniting within him. "No matter what you throw at us, we'll stand united. This is our home, and we won't back down." "Is that so?" The man leaned closer, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're just a factory worker with a family to care for. Do you think you can really take on those who hold the power here? What will that cost you, Jake?" The question hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Jake felt a pulse of panic and fierce determination. He thought of Sarah, Ella, and Max. He thought of all the laughter, the memories, the connections they had woven together in that very community center. The sense of belonging, of love, and everything that made them who they were. With unwavering resolve, Jake straightened. "Maybe you don't understand what community means," he replied, his voice steady as steel. "It's about standing together, fighting for one another. You can threaten us, but together, we're stronger than you think. Your power doesn't scare us." As he looked around the room, he saw nods of agreement, even from those who had faltered before. The spirit of resilience was reigniting. Sarah squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening with pride, as if she too was realizing they wouldn't cower. "Then let us see how strong you really are," the lead man replied, his smug demeanor faltering just a little. "Prepare for a war, folks. But remember, most lose." With that, he turned, his team stepping back into the shadows, leaving a chill in their wake. Jake felt the silence swallow the room. But beneath the surface trembled a current of defiance, encompassing everyone present. This wasn't just about saving a building anymore, it was about their lives, their families, their future. "All right," Mo said, breaking the tension, her voice steady and commanding. "We need to brainstorm a plan and raise our voices louder than ever." As people started to gather, sharing ideas, hope flared again like a phoenix resurrected from ashes. Jake stood tall, fueled by the unwavering support of the community. They'd face whatever came next, together. Jake turned to Sarah, his heart swelling with gratitude. "We can do this, right? Together?" "Absolutely," she said, with a radiant smile that illuminated the darkness surrounding them. "This is just the beginning." Emboldened, Jake stepped forward, feeling the ground beneath them shifting. Let us rally. Let us fight for our homes and our dreams. For every family in this community. We can turn this around. A roar of approval echoed through the hall. Voices united in purpose. Hands raised. Their spirited battle cry pulsed with fervor, shaking off the weight of fear. The night swelled with determination, blending community spirit with the shared fears of uncertainty. They were not just individuals, they were a family, connected and resolute. They may have been standing on the precipice of a war, but together, they held the power to shape their destiny. Suddenly, as laughter and shouts filled the room, Jake noticed something. Hope was spreading beyond the four walls. They would stand together, protect their community, and embrace the fight ahead, whatever the cost might be. And at that very moment, Jake realized that they had already won, simply by choosing to stand for what they believed in. He took Sarah's hand, his heart ablaze with determination. They would rise to the challenge together. For family. For community. For home. Now, Jake knew what was at stake. Their lives mattered, and the fight would be worth every sacrifice. Would they emerge triumphant? Only time would tell, but for the first time in a long time, Jake felt a flicker of hope, a light that shined defiantly amidst the looming darkness ahead. This was their moment. Now, before this story fades into return to daily life, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Hit that like button now and feed the algorithm, because your love helps us reach even more hearts. And comment your reactions, let us know how this story impacted you. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second, your support means the world to us, and only true fans understand the importance of acting now.